It was an entirely ordinary evening. A house with its doors locked, the lights slowly fading, children asleep in their beds. Decades later, somewhere else, a night shift began like any other inside a tightly guarded government facility. There was no loud noise, no chaos, just one small detail that didn't belong, so subtle no one noticed it at the time. By morning, a child was no longer in her bedroom, and years later, a man vanished from a place where no one was supposed to vanish at all. Both cases were given official explanations, but the problem is this: those explanations fail to account for what should have been impossible. What connects two disappearances so different, yet leaves behind the same lingering unease for decades? If you want to understand the single detail that unravels the entire official story, stay with us until the end. And don't forget to like and subscribe to follow more cases that were never truly closed. Tacoma before 1961, a city that learned how to fear. Tacoma, 1935. This did not happen in a dark alley. It did not happen at night. It happened in broad daylight on a busy street. A 9-year-old boy, the son of John Philip Weyerhaeuser, was taken in front of the city itself. His family was among the most powerful in the American timber industry at the time. Money was not a problem. Connections were not a problem. And that was precisely why what happened shook Tacoma to its core. The ransom demand was $200,000, a figure never seen before in any kidnapping case. National media descended on Tacoma. Police tightened control. City officials reassured the public that the situation was under control. The boy was returned. The city exhaled. And for the first time, America understood that a child could disappear in daylight, even when a family had every possible means to protect them. Tacoma, 1936. Less than a year later, the trust that had just been stitched back together tore open again. This time, it was not the son of an industrial magnate. It was the 10-year-old son of Dr. William Matson. He was abducted, and he never came home. His body was found. The perpetrator was arrested and executed. Legally, the case was closed. But socially, Tacoma acquired a different name. A city that lost its children. Parents continued living. Children continued growing up. But the memory of those 2 years never disappeared. It settled into how doors were locked, into how parents watched their children walk to school, into how a generation learned that safety could collapse without warning. Tacoma, late 1950s. Time passed. The war ended. New neighborhoods appeared. Single-story houses, small yards, low fences. Middle-class families moved in. Children walked to school on their own, played outside, rode their bikes through the streets. Life slowly returned to something that felt normal, not because fear was gone, but because it had been pressed down beneath routine. The kidnappings of the past became old stories, recalled as history rather than threat. Tacoma did not forget, but it no longer lived in a constant state of vigilance. A sense of safety was rebuilt, not on proof that danger had disappeared, but on the belief that something like that would not happen here again. And it was in that belief that Tacoma entered the year 1961. August 30th, 1961, a night that didn't seem dangerous. Daytime, August 30th, 1961. The morning began like any other late summer day in North Tacoma. The weather was unusually hot and humid, with no wind and no sign of an approaching storm. Children in the neighborhood spent the day outside, riding their bikes, running between yards. No one was called inside early. No one was warned to be more careful than usual. Inside the Burr family home, attention was focused on something entirely routine: preparing for the new school year. Clothes were folded and put away. School supplies were checked. There were no special plans for the evening. It was an ordinary day. And because it was ordinary, no one noticed that this was the last time everything was still within control. Evening, from around 8 p.m. until just before 11 p.m. As night fell, the Burr family followed their usual routine. No changes, no adjustments. Sleeping arrangements were made for the 4 children. Greg and Julie slept in the basement, inside a small fort they had built themselves. Anne and Julie usually shared a room, but that night Mary was allowed to sleep with Anne. The doors were locked. Don Burr checked them as he did every night. The safety chain was secured. Downstairs windows were closed. One window could not be fully shut, not because it was broken, but because a television cable ran through the opening to an antenna on the roof. From the outside, the window appeared locked. In reality, it could not close completely. The family dog was let out into the backyard, near the kitchen. No one remained outside. No one was moving around the house at that hour. The house was locked. But the space was never completely sealed. Late night, after 11 p.m., not long after everyone had gone to bed, Anne entered her parents' bedroom. She woke her mother and said that Mary was crying. This did not cause alarm. Mary had recently broken her arm. The pain came and went, especially at night. Bev Burr soothed her youngest child back to sleep. No bright lights were turned on. No one else was called. There was no reason to believe anything unusual was happening. Then the storm began. Heavy rain, repeated thunder, strong winds battering the house, the dog barking in bursts from the yard. Sound filled the entire neighborhood. There were no quiet gaps, no moments of silence to distinguish rain from anything else. In those conditions, any unusual noise could easily be swallowed, and no one inside the house had a reason to get up and check. Early morning, around 5:15 a.m. As daylight began to break, Bev Burr woke as she normally did. The first thing she did was go down to the basement to check on Greg and Julie. Everything was unchanged. Both children were still asleep. Bev turned back toward the stairs and went upstairs. She opened the bedroom door where Anne and Mary were sleeping. Mary was still there. Anne was not. At first, there was no panic. Anne was not a child who usually woke early, but she had gotten out of bed before to use the bathroom or get a drink of water. Bev checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. Anne was nowhere. That was when details began to stand out. The front door was open. A living room window was wide open. A stool that had been in the garden the day before lay tipped over beneath the window. No screams had been heard during the night. There were no signs of a struggle. No one in the house had been awakened. And in that moment, the Burr family understood that something had happened, without anyone realizing it while it was happening. The investigation, when silence cannot be explained. The same morning, around 7 a.m., when Tacoma police arrived at the house on North 14th Street, the scene did not resemble a kidnapping. There were no forced doors, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle. In the living room, small grass clippings were found on the carpet, as if someone had stepped inside from outside. On the brick ledge beneath the open window, a single red thread was caught. Beyond that, there was nothing. No blood, no broken glass, no visible violence. The house was too quiet, too orderly, too intact for an event that had just erased a child from it. From 1961 to 1965, the search began immediately. Police officers, volunteers, utility workers, divers were sent into lakes, waterways, and surrounding areas across Tacoma. Hundreds of interviews were conducted. Family members, neighbors, schoolmates, anyone who had passed through the area near the home. Polygraph tests were used extensively. Anne's parents were tested. Friends and acquaintances were tested. Anyone who had been near the house was placed under scrutiny. A teenage neighbor briefly became a person of interest, not because of evidence, but because of proximity and rumors circulating through the neighborhood. Nothing came of it. No breakthrough. The investigation gradually shifted from identifying a single suspect to eliminating possibilities one by one. And with each possibility ruled out, the number of remaining answers grew smaller. From 1965 to 1967, after years of silence, a new lead emerged. A prisoner serving time in Oklahoma wrote to the Burr family. He claimed to know what had happened to Ann. He said she had been abducted and killed while he was working in Washington. For the first time in years, the family was given something concrete, a location, a place said to be her grave. Police brought the man back to the area he described, but the landscape had changed. A major flood years earlier had altered the terrain completely. There was no grave, no remains, nothing to confirm the confession. The last specific lead collapsed there, and the question was no longer who had done this, but whether the truth still existed in a form that could be found. Late 1970s into the early 1980s, when the United States arrested one of the most notorious serial killers in its history, many unresolved cases were reopened. Ted Bundy had lived in Tacoma in the early 1960s. In later interviews, he hinted at a young girl abducted in the city, a location near an orchard, a time frame that aligned. The Burr family wrote to Bundy. They asked him directly about Ann. Bundy replied. He denied any involvement, as he had denied many other things before. There was no physical evidence, no clear confession, no way to verify what he said or what he chose not to say. The past was reopened, but it was still not resolved. From 2003 to 2008, time continued to move forward. Don Burr died in 2003. Bev Burr followed in 2008. The people who had carried the question of Ann's disappearance the longest were gone. The case was never closed, but those who had lived with it for a lifetime were no longer there to see it answered. The file remained open. There were no new answers. If a child could vanish from her own bedroom, without anyone hearing a sound, without leaving clear evidence, then what happens when a person disappears? Inside a place designed so that no one is supposed to disappear at all. June 18, 1984, inside a sealed facility. Before 1984, the Fernald facility sat on the outskirts of Ohio, separated from the surrounding communities. To most local residents, it appeared to be just another industrial plant. On paper, it was operated by a private contractor. In reality, it was under federal control, serving the national nuclear program. For decades, uranium was processed there for weapons production. Workers were instructed not to discuss their jobs, even with their families. Risks were described as minimal. Warnings were reduced to the bare minimum. Over time, a culture formed. Follow procedures. Do not ask questions. Do not step beyond what you are assigned. The system functioned smoothly, not because it was transparent, but because silence was treated as part of the job. The night of June 18, 1984, Dave Box reported for the night shift as usual. He was a maintenance worker, accustomed to long hours inside a vast and quiet facility. At around 11 p.m., he met his carpool partner at a nearby restaurant. They arrived at the plant together, changed into work clothes, received their assignments. Dave was tasked with inspecting a pump that had been malfunctioning. He opened his toolbox, placed his keys and padlocks on top, in plain view. It was a routine action, unhurried, without anything to suggest concern. The night shift began like every other night shift, between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. During the shift, Dave was seen speaking with a supervisor. The two stood inside a truck with the windows rolled up, despite the unusually warm night. After that, Dave walked back into the facility, but not toward the area he had been assigned. He moved off his expected route. No one stopped him. No one asked for an explanation. After that moment, no one saw Dave again. There was no alarm, no emergency notice. No protocol was triggered at the time. His absence was not recognized immediately. In a large facility, it was not unusual to go hours without seeing a specific worker. Around 5 a.m., inside the plant's furnace system, a small anomaly was recorded. The furnace temperature dropped unexpectedly, not once, but twice within a short span of time. Each drop was only a few dozen degrees, not enough to trigger alarms, not enough to force a shutdown. The system corrected itself automatically. At the time, no one connected these fluctuations to a person, but the timing of the drops aligned with the window in which Dave disappeared from oversight. 3 days later, the furnace was shut down and allowed to cool. Workers began to inspect the interior. What they found did not resemble a mechanical failure. A fragment of an eyeglass frame, the steel toe from a work boot, a piece of a metal name tag, parts of a walkie-talkie, and fragments of bone burned beyond recognition. Dave Box was no longer missing. He had been there, inside a system designed to melt metal. From 1984 to 1986, the question shifted quickly. It was no longer where Dave had gone, but how he had entered the furnace. One explanation was put forward: suicide. It was based on Dave's past mental health treatment, on the assumption that he had climbed up and jumped in. His family objected. His doctor objected. From a physical standpoint, the theory raised problems. The furnace opening was too small for an adult to enter unaided. The temperature was too high to allow prolonged access without severe injury beforehand. The inconsistencies remained, but the investigation did not move further. A conclusion was written before all questions had been answered. 1989, the Fernald facility was shut down. Information that had been suppressed for years began to surface. Decades of radioactive releases were exposed. Many workers and nearby residents developed cancer. What had once been described as safe could no longer withstand the evidence. By then, Dave Box was no longer alive to see it. The truth emerged, but too late to change what had happened on the night of June 18, 1984. 2 disappearances, separated by decades, in 2 entirely different settings. A child vanished from her own bedroom. A man vanished inside a tightly guarded industrial facility. Both cases were investigated. Both received official conclusions, and both stopped at the same place, where silence was treated as necessary to preserve order. In both cases, the problem was not a lack of evidence. It was that the evidence did not lead to a conclusion the system was willing to accept. When no safe answer existed, the files were closed. Not because everything had been explained, but because the system needed to keep functioning. What remains is not a clear truth or a named culprit. What remains is residue. Tacoma still carries the memory of a child who never came home. Fernald was shut down, leaving behind cancer statistics and contaminated land. The cases remain open, but the people who waited for answers are no longer here. Some stories do not lack evidence. They lack the willingness to confront it. If history is written by what is preserved, what had to be erased so that we could sleep at night? If you have your own thoughts about these cases, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that were never truly closed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.